What is going on, good people? Hey, this is Justin over at the Someday Life podcast. Thanks for jumping in to this episode. I know you're going to really enjoy it. This guest is a miracle, literally. She's a heart failure survivor, and she's completely turned around what doctors thought was a death sentence. So I know you're going to enjoy this story. It's very interesting and very inspiring. If you're new to the podcast, what we're doing over here is, interviewing guests and peeling the layers back, finding out what makes them tick. We all know that people fail, and I want to know why they're succeeding. What do they do through their failures? What allows them to thrive in their passion space? And that's what I'm bringing to you. Someday life can mean can mean different things, right? To everybody. And to me, it is doing the things that I said someday I would do. It's finally making the choice to stop procrastinating and to start taking immediate action. So I hope that you guys are doing the exact same. If you haven't already, jump over to Instagram at Someday Life Podcast. Give me a follow. You can jump on Facebook as well if you're not a big IG person. Of course, all the episodes are live on YouTube. So make sure you hit subscribe so you can get updated on any new content that I send out there. This episode, guys, is sponsored by All Shine Cleaning Services. They fit right into the someday life because someday you may want to clean your house, right? I want to clean my carpets. I want to get that pet urine smell out of my carpets, or I want to clean my car. The upholstery's a mess, or whatever it is. These guys can do it. They do the residential carpet cleaning, pet urine restoration, dryer vent cleaning, which is pretty cool, tile and grout. So give them a call at 208-403-7107 or schedule your own appointment around your schedule at allshine-idaho.com. I've used them several times. I'm not going to put any sponsors on the podcast that I haven't used personally, and businesses that I believe in, and they've done a tremendous job for me in the past, and that's why I wanted to have them as a sponsor, because I know that they'll deliver to you great customer satisfaction, and their quality is just outstanding. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode with Alicia Reinhard. She is awesome. She has a contagious personality, and if after this podcast you are not motivated to get out there and make it happen, then I don't know what to tell you. So do me a favor, if you do like this episode, you get something out of it, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it on your social media. Let's spread the word, and let's get out there and start living our someday lives. Remember, life is too short to wait for someday. Go make it happen.
I think it's feedback from other people gives us just little nuggets. And again, it's take only what serves you, right? If there's one piece that I talk about today that somebody takes and applies to their life, I think that that's a win. I think but I appreciate that you're creating a platform to ask just, ordinary people, like, what makes you tick? Tell us about it, because it's like Oprah Winfrey did this on a very large scale, but it's people need feedback. People need to be able to relate and adjust their sails, and it's okay to start now, right? Because we can look and say, oh, well, my past has been X, Y, and Z. It's like, who cares? Who cares where you came from? Where are you right now, and where are you going? Let's get clear on that and full steam ahead, right? It doesn't matter where you've been. We don't all start at the same start line. I've heard somewhere that it's not our fault if we're not born into money. If you're born with no money, it's not your fault. You can't control that. But it is your fault if you die without money. That's absolutely your fault, and only your fault.
Yeah, so I agree with that. Well, let's just start there. I mean, just what you were saying there. I want to piggyback on that a little bit, because there's a lot of times where in life, I feel like, there's this saying, like, you're not responsible for the cards that you're dealt, but you are responsible for how you play the hand. And I think that's so true through just a series of choices that we've made along our journey. We're trying to figure things out. So, and that's what I'm trying to bring as the podcast host and founder, is like, hey, I just want to bring the rawness. I want to bring the backstories of people, and let the audience understand that we're all kind of in this together, and we all I think just too often you see the nice car rolling down the road, but you don't understand what it took to make that vehicle, like the challenges and the adversity and the design. And I feel like that's a lot to do with human life as well, is that we're quick to judge on the surface. We've kind of become this surface society. And so, with social media and things like that, so we see influencers, we see like who we portray as successful people. And I'm trying to like peel the layers back of that. I want to see like, what's your most challenging moments in your life? How did you overcome those? Do you deal with anxiety? Do you deal with fear? Like the common emotions that most of us battle on a daily basis, whether it's in our careers or in our marriages or friendships or kids, as a parent. I mean, these are all things that I want to get out there to the public and let everybody kind of just pick their little nuggets from the conversation, like what fits well with them, right?
I love it.
I was going to tell you before we were talking, so I came across this quote the other day, and it says, your career is what you're paid for. Your calling is what you're made for.
Love it.
Isn't that so cool? Steve Harvey, the comedian gentleman, he said that on, I can't remember what podcast he was on, but I wrote that down because I'm like, that resonates with my life completely. Because I think oftentimes you kind of wrap yourself into your career. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that's what you do, but that's not who you are. Yeah. And it took me.
Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
So it says, I have it here in my journal here. I haven't memorized it yet because I just came across it. Your career is what you're paid for. Your calling is what you're made for.
Yep.
So cool.
So cool. I think that's our starting place.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of, let's bring the audience up to date a little bit, kind of like, what we were saying before we started recording was we were talking a lot about kind of that same thing with your career. We're talking about your bio and stuff like that. And you're like, well, this is not, we're kind of talking about how this doesn't really define people. It's so hard to kind of sum that up.
Yeah. Well, it's like Snoopy, the adult teacher, wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
It's like, they're just words. And it's like, I love that saying, your career is what you're paid for. What are you made for? And I think for me, it's that journey of realizing what you're made for and really just coming into showing up and being all in. And, I think it's, like I was telling you, we don't all start at the same start line, but it's, so what? I mean, how boring would it be if we all did the same thing? I was reading a quote out of Success Magazine the other day that said, don't show up for 75 years living the same day and call it a life, right? It's, and I want to be alive, and I don't have a clear path. I don't know that I'm going to inspire anyone for like, hey, you're going to get clear on your vision today. I'm just going to have the guts to do it. Have the guts to show up and put yourself out there, be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to screw it up. And it's, and that's a different kind of life. I think you like quotes. I like quotes.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast the other day. Brene Brown is very insightful with the psychology of, living life with a whole heart and being connected. But she was interviewing an author friend of hers, and I didn't read the book, but it was Taming the Wild was the book. And one of the discussion points that I connected with is we don't need to save our children. Our children need to see us saving ourselves. And that was like, bam, like hit me right in the face. Like, save myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, think of how many sacrifices we make for our children, right? And we serve ourselves last. We're willing to take what's left over. And can I just start talking? Can I just go into like,
we've been rocking and rolling for the last few minutes. So all the good stuff usually comes right in the beginning.
Well, I just think it's like, so it's, I worked in title and escrow for 20 years, 15 years, I take that back, for 15 years. And it's was running a busy personal and professional life, just go, go, go. I love a busy day. I love serving, and it's my niche in real estate now. Serving is my niche. And that's what speaks to me. I like to add value to people, and it's, and help out, help make an informed decision. I think it's powerful. Education is the key. And it's, I was traveling for Women's Council, and we were in DC, and we flew in on a late night flight. We got up early, we hit our conference, we walked, we had a French lunch, which is salty, like a salty food. And we're back in the conference room. By the end of the day, I had no ankles. I call them cankles. They were just like straight down, like no definition in my leg. And that was not normal for me. It was not normal. And so of course, I hit the girl next to me. I'm like, hey, look at my gross ankle. Like, look under the table. Look at this. And she was like, oh, it's fine. It's just a little swollen. I was like, no, that's weird. Like, my legs have never swelled on me before. I don't understand why it would start now. But I'm like, so I'm sitting there and I'm kind of like tuning out who's talking, because it's not normal, right? And I'm like, this is our last meeting of the day. I'm going to sneak out. You finish taking the notes. I'm going to go put my feet up, because we have a whole award ceremony tonight that I've got to get to. So let me just go put my feet up and see if I can get this to go down, because it's weird. And so I go back to the room. I send a snap to my husband, like, look at this. And he's like, oh, you've been flying, you've been in conferences. What'd you eat for lunch? I'm like, salty food. He's like, that's all that it is. You've eaten, you know what I mean? Something is just, you're retaining water. Like, I think you're fine. I'm like, you're right. Well, I was having these, like, I thought it was maybe anxiety at night. I was like, man, what's going on? So when we get back to Boise, I went to my son's allergist. I was convinced I've eaten something that isn't agreeing with me. I'm having an allergic reaction maybe to something. And so I go to the allergist and I'm like, what's going on? And he's now retired, but he was pulling out his hearing aids as I was discussing what was going on. And he gives me a Buterol and says, you're going to be right as rain in 4 days. Take these. And he was treating the breathing just as like a panic attack, kind of like asthma, so yeah, kind of a thing, right? So I go home and we're 3 days into the 4 days, and it's beautiful weather. It's in May. This is 5 years ago, and it's going to be gorgeous out, and I want to wear shorts. And I'm like, I'm not wearing shorts with cankles. So I swing into Rite Aid, and I'm like, hey, what do you recommend for over the counter for swelling in the legs? What do you like, Epsom salt or something, or what else do you recommend? And they were like, nothing over the counter. I would use a diuretic. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't know what a diuretic was. And he was like, you got to get it from your doctor. I'm like, oh, perfect. So me being me, I just call my allergist and I'm like, hey, I need a diuretic. I'm here. I'll wait 15 minutes, call it in. Mm-hmm. And Dr. T took over the practice, and she was like, what do you need a diuretic for? And I was like, well, the swelling, Dr. Callanan, gave me some things telling me I'd be right as rain in 4 days, and it's not working. And I need to ask more questions. Something's not right. And she's like, leave Rite Aid and come to my office. So I arrive at her office, and she's running an assessment on me. And she's like, Alicia, I feel like something with your heart is going on. And I'm like, my heart? She's like, I'd like you to go to the emergency room and get some tests. And I was like, no, if something's wrong with my heart, I'm not going to go through a litany of, being poked and prodded and feeling frustrated. I know how I operate. I need to make an informed decision. And I was like, how do I need to know if it's my heart? And she goes, well, you need an EKG and some blood work. I'm like, no problem. So I just call my doc in the box. And I'm like, hey, I'm en route. I'm 15 minutes out. When I get there, I need an EKG and blood work. I'll see you in a minute. And obviously, same thing. You can't call in your own EKG and blood work. That's not how it works. So I get there and they're like, hey, sorry, we're not just calling this in for you. We're not doing this. And I was like, well, what would it take for you to assess me? I'm here. Give me an assessment. So the doctor's like, come on back. Gives me an assessment, agrees to the EKG and the blood work. And she no longer gives me an option. She goes, there's already a room being prepared for you at the hospital. You can't drive a vehicle. We can call an ambulance, or you can have someone give you a ride. So I'm like, what? You just kind of, it's like you start, the way I can just immediately describe it is it's an out of body experience, right? Just hearing like, I'm 35 years old. You think something's wrong with my heart. Like, what? It's, so I call my husband. I'm like, hey, drop the kids off at the neighbors and come get me. They think my heart, something's going on with my heart. So we need to just check it out. Don't worry about it, but let's just check it out. And he's like, I'm on my way. So he picks me up, we get to the ER or to the hospital, and we get immediately checked in, and they run tests, and it's the storm cloud arrives. The doctor then says, your heart is operating at 14% capacity. We do a heart transplant at 10%. You have a dilated cardiomyopathy, and we are very concerned for your well-being, and we're not sure if you're going to make it through the weekend. We're getting on the radar for life flight to Salt Lake, and it's and they say to my husband, he's talking to me, but it's like this out-of-body experience. He says, you could be on respirators and potentially life support this weekend. And I just remember hearing a little voice in my head saying, no, you are going to be fine, and you need to get control of this situation and only take the things that serve you. Like I can hear like tune this guy out. And so I excused this particular doctor from the team altogether with the information, because it was so egregious the way he was painting it. I was having a hard time even figuring out. I'm like, I worked all week. I drove here, like I'm not going to be on life support and gone by the end of this weekend. And my husband's white as a ghost. And I was like, here's the deal. And I just grabbed his face and I was like, I hear the voice inside of me. I can hear it saying, I am the author of this story. And this is, I don't know what we're dealing with, but I can tell you, we're going to deal with it as we're just going to take step by step. And we're going to ask questions, but we're going to filter through this, and we're going to be positive, because I need that. I need that right now. I've always been a positive person. I've always pulled through like quotes and emotional things that just give me a charge and light my fire inside. And I'm like, this is going to be no different. I'm like, I've been practicing for this moment my whole life, and I didn't know it, right? Like I'm here, and it's, so anyways, the road ahead is, we maximize medicine for a year, and it's zero, it's unchanged. So they put in a pacemaker defibrillator, which went in 1 year from finding that. And it's, this was 2015, and it's, so the pacemaker defibrillator goes in, it's at 22% function with a pacemaker defibrillator. And anything under 25% is severe congestive heart failure. So it's not an event, it's like a state of being. I just live with severe congestive heart failure, and it's my label, and it's and I've never connected with the information that they've given me. I do all of the things. I take the medicine. I removed alcohol completely from my diet. I watched my sodium. Sodium's in a lot of food. Salt is, sneakily in everything that we eat. And so I started watching my sodium intake. I started being really cognizant of what I was putting into my body and how I was treating myself. And that's all I could control. So that was a win for me. I'm like, it's all the other things. I met with the heart transplant team out of Salt Lake, and it's, and there's a team of 4. I met 3 of the doctors. And they'd said, 3 to 10 years, you're getting a new heart. Whoa. That's it, you're getting a new heart. And it's, I'm like, that's so nuts. Like, who gets a new heart? Am I gonna be a different person? Like, all these questions start racing through your mind. And I'm like, well, let's cross that bridge when we get there. Let's not future worry about this. They say stress is man-made. And it's, I don't want to stress out about it. So I gave it up to God right away. Like, I'm like, God, you're going to take all this, because I got a life to live, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do and all the things that I can control, but I can't stress out about this. So if you could just take that worry for me and you put that on your shoulders, and guess what? Without even batting an eye, he took it all for me, right? Like, yep, absolutely. I absolutely will carry this weight for you. And so I never had the burden of it. I just did what I needed to do. I externalized everything instead of making it personal. It wasn't happening to me. This was happening for me. And I started recognizing that there's something. I got clearer with my family. I got closer with my family. I got closer with myself. I'm like, this is pretty important stuff that's happening right now. And I'm very grateful for heart failure. I don't know if people would say that, but I do. I feel very grateful for that. And it's 2 years ago, they told me that they've done everything that they can for me. There's a team of doctors following me outside in Duke University. They're a research hospital. So just curious, because they're like, you look at you on paper and then you look at you in person and they don't correlate. There's it, and I'm like, well, that's because I'm not sick. I'm like, I'm not taking ownership of that. Like, sorry, like, nope, not doing it. And so it's backing up a little bit. So once I got back to work at Pioneer, everyone was thrilled to have me back, but they were taking my projects from my plate, right? Like taking my workload off, and they were just like, just out of love, right? They were glad that I was there, but I was like, you guys, I need these things. I need to feel, I'm not sick. I don't want to feel sick. I don't want to be treated sick. I just want to get back to work. And I do remember feeling like, well, God, yeah, I was a little tired, but I'm a busy mom. I'm a busy wife. I'm a busy, worker. I'm like, I show up, and yeah, I'm feeling a little tired, but I'm going to rest now, and I'm going to get through this. And it's the owner of Silver Creek Realty Group, the Dowdy family. They reached out to me and just said, he goes, are you well? I'm like, I am. I'm well. I'm healthy. And he's like, well, Alicia, we would like to have you come work for our family. Would you consider a job change? And I was like, I had been offered jobs in the past within the industry, and I believe the grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is green where you water it, and I water my lawn. So I'm like, I have never felt compelled to say yes in my life to anybody else. And I was like, Erin, like right now, I just want to say yes. And I want to tell you I'm going to be there Monday. I was like, but I have to talk with the powers that be here, because they're important to me and they're my family, and they've taken care of me for 15 years in sickness and in health. They're very important, but I'm ready and I'm saying yes to you. I'm coming. So count me in. I'm ready for a new challenge. And so I did. I switched gears. My family just about had a heart attack on me. My mom is like, you can't do this. You can't leave a job that's, with security to start a new job. And I'm like, listen, I wasn't asking your permission. I've actually already done it, and you'll catch up. You don't need to be on board right now. You'll warm up to the idea, and you can take as long as you need to warm up to it. But I've already decided, and I'm already going to move forward. So take your time. Don't feel pressure that you have to be on board with me and support me right now. I'm okay. Like, I'm moving forward. I know I'm not staying put. I'm ready for more and on to the next. And so I loved Silver Creek, and I was there for 5 years. And like I said, 2 years ago, they told me that there's nothing more that they could do for me for my heart. So I stopped taking the test, the benchmark tests. They do an echocardiogram, just the function, the squeeze function of your heart, just to see how it's doing. And it's and so I stopped them. I was like, well, if we don't do anything different, and I'm just going to get a heart transplant, I'll let you know when I'm tired. Like, if that's how you're basing it, I'll just tell you when I'm tired, because I'm not tired right now, and I'd rather not pay for an expensive test. And the doctor was like, we'd really like you not to do that. Like, we like the benchmarks. I'm like, I totally get it, but I'm declining. So he's like, all right. So it was Mother's Day of 2020. And almost, that 5-year mark, it was May to May, almost 5 years to the day from when all of this happened. And my husband and I took our kids up Stack Rock, up Bogus Basin. I live in Boise, Idaho. So we went up Stack Rock. It's about a 10-mile hike. And I ran 3 of those miles. And I wear my little Apple heart monitor, and my breathing, everything was getting right back to resting breath. Like, and I'm like, dang, there's no way that I haven't improved. There's no way, like, how could I run 3 miles and not feel tired? Like,
oh yeah.
I'm like, there's no way I haven't improved. I'm like, now I'm curious. I'm like, I want the test. I want another test, because I've asked God every day for a miracle. I've asked God every day to heal me, and I've been open to it. And there's days that I feel tired, but I'm like, well, it's really hard work healing. Like, he's doing his work. Sometimes I just need a rest. And I called my doctor. It gets me right in on the next Monday. And on Wednesday, they call me, and he's like, you're not going to believe this. Your heart condition has reversed. And I was like, I am not shocked, honestly. I'm not shocked. And he's like, I'm like, you said that wasn't possible though. He's like, it's not. What we prescribed to you, a dilated cardiomyopathy doesn't reverse. An enlarged heart doesn't go back to a normal size heart. And you did. We're calling you a pandemic miracle. We don't know what else to call it. But it's fixed. And I was like, amazing. I love it. And so I go home and I tell my husband about this, and we're excited. We're celebrating. And I was like, and I might need therapy for this. He's like, therapy for a miracle? I was like, yeah. He's like, talk to me about this. Why do we need therapy for the miracle? He's like, I'm like, well, what's my responsibility? Like, God doesn't heal everybody. God doesn't, does he? I'm like, do I have an obligation to talk about this more? I'm like, what? I don't want to drop the ball on him. Like, if I'm supposed to be doing something more with this. And he's like, honestly, honey, I think you just get to accept the blessing, and we get to plan the rest of our lives. I'm like, I like that. Okay. I'm like, I'm going to accept the blessing and move on. And it's mid-June, and I'm sitting at my desk, and my little voice that I've now identified as being God, I thought it was my self-talk. And now I'm like, oh, God speaks to us internally. I didn't make that connection. I didn't grow up in a very religious family, and I didn't understand that God speaks to us internally. And I love that. And so I'm going to pay closer attention to those little voices in my head, because I now recognize it's the universe, it's God, it's a higher power collaborating with us, supporting us. And so I'm working away at my desk, and I love my job. I love all my people. And my little voice says, you got to go. You got to go. You've got more you need to be doing. And I like stopped, and I like look up, like literally like at God, and I'm like, right now? Like, okay. So I stood up, I walked into Aaron's office, and I'm like, Aaron, I'm going to switch gears on you. And he's like, well, what do you mean? You want to work downstairs? And I was like, he's like, well, I think I made the decision that I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and I want to go to work for myself. And he's like, hold on a minute here, sit down. Like, you're throwing me through a loop. Like, what are you talking about? You're going to go work for yourself. And I was like, no, trust me, I'm throwing myself through a loop. Bo doesn't even know. I didn't know. I was like, God and I were just talking in my office, and I don't know if it's the miracle, but I have no fear. And he told me I got to go right now. Now is the time. I was like, and he's not going to have to ask me twice. I'm going. And I don't need a clear path. I know I'm going to show up, and that's enough for me. I'm going. And he was like, holy moly. Okay, well, I was like, and everyone's replaceable. I'm replaceable. You're going to find someone that's amazing. And everybody is replaceable. I'm like, and I'm no exception to that rule. So July 1, I went into real estate full time on my own as an entrepreneur, and I'm 150% all in. It's exactly what I needed to do. And the clarity, there's still no fear, like no fear, like faith over fear. I believe in it. I believe in God. I believe in that everything, if I show up and do what I need to do and put my absolute best foot forward, everything else is going to work out.
Absolutely. That has to be one of the craziest stories that I've heard.
It's a crazy story.
Well, just like like crazy in a good way, because I mean, I haven't met many people. I think we've all heard about miracle stories and things like that, and I'm sure you, I mean, it's probably the same thing for you too. You're like, how is this even happening to me? Like, why is this happening to me? You know?
Well, why? Well, I said why, but then I just think, like, when you get out of that, it's like it happened for me. Congestive heart failure
Yes.
didn't happen to me, it happened for me.
Absolutely.
And there's so many. 2020 was the best year of my life. And that's, one of those things that I'm like, is it okay to say that out loud? Is it okay to say in a year that was a really hard year for a lot of people? Is it okay to say it was my best year ever? I'm like, yeah, it's okay to say that. It's okay to celebrate that. It was a really big year. It was a really important year for us as a family. And it's and I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And I read a quote even when I started in real estate. It's if they praise you, show up anyways. If they criticize you, show up anyways. And if nobody says anything at all, show up anyways. And I was like, wow, this pretty much sums up my life right now, because there were some people criticizing me, there were some people praising me, and there were some people that were saying nothing at all. And I'm like, this is perfect. Mm-hmm. This is perfect. This is exactly what it's supposed to be like. And all I have to do is keep showing up and giving my best. And it's, I freaking love it. It's, I'm alive, and I am not going to live 75 years every single day the exact same and call it a life. I'm going to, they say, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you land amongst the stars. And right. It's, that's where I'm going to hang out, way out there.
So were you always an optimistic person like this before this event happened? Like, have you always kind of practiced, just being positive and just knowing that good things will come to you if you have, put out good vibes and good energy?
I would say it's been a work in progress, I would say. So it's, but I would say the visions that I see today, I could tell you I didn't see them 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I feel like being open to new visions and new opportunities is part of the growth. And sometimes we can't see that full big picture yet because we're not ready for it. And it's, and I'm okay with being right where I need to be and not comparing myself to where others are, because it's where I'm at. I need all of these pieces, all of these building blocks. And it's, I grew up in a family. I was our middle child. There were four kids. And it's, my dad was the youngest Green Beret. He was a Green Beret at the age of 18. And he was a pretty badass guy that ruled with an iron fist. Sure, and children should be seen, not heard, kind of a mentality. And I grew up in Cassadaga, New York, which is a little small farming community an hour outside of Buffalo, New York. And it's the town that my dad grew up in, and so on, right? So it's a small town America. I remember my dad telling me, honey, you can go anywhere you want in this world. And I'm like, really, Dad? We don't even have an airport. Like, it's like, we got nothing here, it's, but it's, not having a voice. When I turned 18, I moved to Boise, Idaho. My senior year, my dad got a job transfer to Cheraw, South Carolina, and it was a really tough year. People aren't taking friend applications, the senior year. And I did end up making friends, and it was great, but it wasn't my home. I didn't feel like I quite fit in South Carolina. It just didn't feel, I knew it wasn't my forever home. And my sister was living in Boise, Idaho, and her husband is now a retired colonel in the Air Force, and he was working out in Mountain Home. And she bought a house for $116,000 on Harrison Boulevard, which, if you know our area, Harrison Boulevard, it's just crazy how real estate's gone up. But this is 1996. I moved here in 1998. I came to visit for just a month. I graduated high school, kind of felt like a ball lost in high weeds. And she said, why don't you come out to Boise and just take a step back so you can get your head on straight and figure out what you want to do. So I came out initially to visit Boise for a month, and I canceled my flight after 2 weeks enrolled at Boise State, and called home and said, I'm here. I'm not coming back. I'm just going to be here. And I live in Boise now. And my mom's like, what? You're not coming back? I'm like, no, just send me my stuff. I am just going to stay here. And my sister, when you're in the military, you move every 2 years. So they were here for about another 6 months, and then they moved on. So it was just me. And it's, you know, I remember my dad telling me that I would be back. And I remember thinking in my brain, not a chance, not a chance. I'm just stubborn. I like figuring things out on my own. And it was really hard. It's, I had 3 different jobs that I worked, and I still had no money, right? You work a lot, and it's rent, gas, food, like, you know, you're just, I met my husband at 19, and we've been married for 20 years. We've got 2 great kids, and we grew up as adults together now, right? Like I didn't meet him until after I was in high school, but we grew up our adult lives together. And there's something to being young and dumb and not having any money. And we played cards, and we'd go for walks. And there were things that we did that when you have no money, you make up other things to go do that keep you busy. And and so I've always pulled from like myself up by my own bootstraps, going, the only person I can count on is me. And that's how I felt. Like, even though I had a supportive family and other people in my life supporting me, what I had found is when I didn't show up, none of it worked. I had to show up and put in the work, whether it be a relationship or a job. It's, I always strive to just be my best. And it's, you know, both of my parents taught me that whatever you do in this world, it's worth doing well. Yeah. You know, my dad would always use the street sweeper as the example. If you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best damn street sweeper that exists, right? Like, just, and so that's, you know, I have a good work ethic, and I come from a family with a strong work ethic. And I think growing up, sorry, my dog is coming in. He wants to join us.
Pawing out the door. Let me in. I love this story.
Yeah. So that's the scoop. It's just a small town USA girl doing her thing, and it's all working out.
I think it's way more than that. I mean, it is, I mean, just your tenacity and your your energy is just off the charts. It's so cool to see. You know, it's funny that, do you think, how do I want to word this question? So do you think it takes things like that? I mean, do you think people without experiencing something life-threatening, do you think people can rewire their mentality to just recapture life and just kind of do a 180? You know, because a lot of times, you know, we're kind of forced. I think about this quote all the time, and I have it downstairs in my office because it just reminds me to exercise and to eat well. And it's basically says, you know, if you don't take care of your wellness, you'll be forced to take care of your illness. And for me, that's one of those things that just hits you right in the head. Right in the head. And it's like, okay, that reminds me that I need to be. And when I talk about wellness, I'm talking about, like, you know, mental and physical and things like that. And so I just think, like, sometimes you have life just kind of hits you, and I think it hits everybody in just different phases of their life. And it's going to hit, and it's going to hit hard, and it's about how you recover from that. But I've always wondered, like, you know, I've heard miracle stories similar to yours, where they totally have a different outlook on life, you know, or somebody has like a near-death experience. I know about 5-6 years ago, I was just nonchalantly driving my truck, and I had my 3 little kids in the back of it, and we were literally going to the car wash and going to get tickets to like the rodeo that was coming into town. And the light turned green, and I just went to drive, and just boom, T-boned at 40 miles an hour. I mean, it happened so fast. I didn't even know what happened, really. You know, I just remember ringing and just the wah, 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 wah in my head. And I remember looking back, and my kids' eyes were all lit up, but I could tell they were looking at me, it took us a few seconds to kind of gather ourselves.
Yeah, scary,
And
terrifying.
yeah, it was. And that experience right there really, I can't say it definitely hasn't changed me. I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, it's changed me and I've totally just, went 100 miles an hour at life, because I've always kind of been an optimistic person and I've always kind of pursued that way. But it really put it into perspective to me how quickly that I could have been gone, or my wife could have just been a widow with no kids, no husband, and like how quickly that changes. And I'm sure people listening to this now, they all have, stories where this has happened and maybe they didn't come out of it like I did. It's a lot more tragic. But
well, I thank God that we're puzzles and that we don't know when we're going to go, right? Like that's the part of being human. But I also think it's, having something hit close to home, I think gives you that clarity.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel you have to have something happen to you to get it. I think it's what I think is just the power of daily choice. We make so many choices, probably 1,000 choices a day, right? Just little things. And, what I would just recommend is, one, carving out a time every day just to check in with yourself. Where are you at? And reflect on what you're grateful. Tell those around you, like, live your life this way. Like, I love you. You know what I mean? I call my husband, we tell each other we love each other all the time. And I do that because if something ever happened, I want my kids to know I love them. We didn't grow up this household where we were always hugging and talking about feelings. I would say my dad didn't believe in feelings or allergies or anything. Like, he just didn't believe in it, like, it's just not a thing. Like, get over it, right? Rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy being human and feeling all the feels. There's times it's okay to feel nervous about something. It's okay to feel excited about something. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, but you gotta get it in perspective and just walk yourself through that. You can't remove those emotions, none of them, but you can set yourself up for focusing on, setting your intention every day with what you came to do. And every day, I go through this in my head when I wake up and when I go to sleep. And so one of the tricks that I do in the morning is, when I wake up, before I even get out of bed and go for a cup of coffee or something like that, I lay in bed and I think about the first happy thought that comes to my mind. And then maybe it's just like, oh, I'm so comfortable right now. Like, it's, and somebody taught me how to do this, but it's, pay attention to the words that you're being, the people that you're surrounded with, and take the things that serve you. But this spoke to me that I'm like, so I just try and just settle in, and I try and wake up with a smile on my face. Like, today's a gift. Mm-hmm. And life can change in a blink, in an absolute blink. And I know that. I've got that clarity piece on it, but I can also tell you, I'm still going to show up and live my life and put myself out there in ways that I don't always feel like, like it's a sure thing, but I show up anyways. And I'm like, well, let's give it a shot. And it's they say success happens when opportunity meets preparation. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be prepared, and sharpening our axe it's our responsibility to sharpen our axe. No one else is going to do this for us. And, whatever it may be, whatever brings you joy, whatever you connect with, do that. Like, I'm not going to say you got to do it my way or your way. It's whatever way works for you, do that, but set it up and make it a non-negotiable, and tune out people if they're not serving you. This quote is a kind of a sad little quote. It says, 80% of people don't care, and 20% are glad you have the problem. I'm like, oh my gosh. What? I'm like, 80% of people don't care and 20% are glad you have the problem. I'm like, that is just not the way I'm going to live my life. But what I glean from that is not everybody wants to see you be successful. Not everybody wants to share in that. So be careful on who you're sharing your deepest, wildest dreams with, because they're important. Protect those. And share with people that believe in you and add to that vision, bring you joy and build upon that, because we have to be really careful where we're creating from. If you're creating from a place of fear or scarcity, you're building on a shaky platform, right? So get clear from the get-go. If you got to go to counseling. There's no shame in that. It's I've gone through to therapy a few times. I mean, when I had my son Dexter, he's 15 years old now, but when I became a mother, I was like, holy moly, can I do this? Am I going to be mean to this kid? Like, no, I'm not going to be mean to him. But it's like, sometimes you just feel like what you know is, I'm going to rule with an iron fist because that's what I know. And I'm like, I didn't want to treat him that way. And there's no right or wrong answer, I think, with the way that our parents show up. We again can take what serves us and take the things that we like, and then we can create new traditions and build upon it for something greater. But I had to go get clarity on old tapes in my head and work through those. And it's worth it. You're worth it, right? To put in the time and get your mind right and clarity. And it's worth its weight in gold. And
Absolutely.
It's necessary.
It is necessary, because I feel like if you can't love yourself and help yourself and get yourself into that spot, then it's so hard to serve other people, your children, your spouse, your friends, your parents, and, just everybody in life, because I think you're always getting pulled. We get pulled in so many angles all the time, but you have to, I go back to one of the first podcast episodes I did with a good friend of mine, Jennifer McCulloch, and she was, I
love Jen.
Yeah, Jen's awesome. And she talks about being selfishly you. And sometimes, her take is that we got to be, you got to be selfish sometimes. You got to make sure you make time for yourself, because you're not going to be able to make time, for the other people, at least not like quality time. You're just like, if you're agitated and you're irritated with your kids, and I'm not saying every day needs to be perfect, because God knows that that's not how life works.
Life is messy.
Right? Yeah, it is messy. But it needs to be like a controlled mess, right? You need to have control over it. And you are the epitome of someday life. Like, when I came up with this idea and I started putting together this plan and this message that I wanted to share, you would be, you're the epitome of that. You're somebody who is out there doing things, and you're not afraid to take the risks. And I'm sure, maybe we have people, listen to this where they're just like, oh yeah, well, she had a near-death experience, no wonder why she is how she is. Look, that was a choice. And every day, you that are listening or watching this, we all have choices to make. That same conversation I was telling you about that I had with my friend last night about I said, well, theoretically, you have $1 million in your bank account tomorrow. What are you going to do with it? Because he talks about wanting to do, businesses and stuff, and just didn't really have any idea, right? But I told him, I'm like, look, statistically, over 7,000 every day, over 7,000 people die in the United States. So that means tomorrow when we wake up, there will be over 7,000 people that wake up for the last time, right? And you really need to start thinking about that, of like how short life is. And this idea to hide in this box of comfort is absurd to me. It's absurd to me now because I've found ways to get out of it. But yes, I was in that same box at one point, and I'm trying to encourage people to just break that box open. Yeah. Because what is the worst thing that can happen? Like, there's really a lot of people, they feel like they almost have, for lack of a better word, they kind of have like a gun to their head, like, well, if this doesn't work out, then that's the end. But it's not. There's so many opportunities that come from failure. And that's the biggest thing that I've found, is that I've failed more than I've succeeded. And I'm okay with that, because in my successes, they've all been worth it. They're worth so much to me. They're victories that I will share with my kids and my grandkids, and I'll let them know, like, hey, you're going to trip. I think about my kids when they were younger, and, I'm 35 years old. I have a young family. I'm just kind of going on that route. And, I sit back sometimes and I think about where my kids were, bringing them home that first day in the car seat, and you're just nervous as heck that you have a human being, that doctors let you take them out of the hospital. And then now I have my 10-year-old, and we just did a competitive basketball tournament, and he's like, and I have these conversations with him, and we're just like, I can't believe this is where he's at. But at one point I was so nervous, like, I'm going to break this thing. I'm going to drop it. I'm going to break it. Like, are they ever going to talk to me? Like, what's the conversation's going to be like? But then it just, like that, it flies by so quickly, and you realize, holy smokes, it's here. And I'm so glad that I've been able to find some clarity in my life and be able to pursue things. Because, like, starting a podcast, for example, I mean, you're talking about getting out, you're meeting strangers all the time, just kind of like this conversation now. You and I don't know each other prior to this.
Right.
Like, you got to put yourself out there, and good things happen, because I think naturally as human beings, like, we love one another so much, and we're so much like one another, that we just have to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable. And then it eliminates the ego, and it makes you humble and grateful for life. And I just felt like now's the time for me to do this, and to start this message, and hopefully it spreads. And I know there's a lot of similar messages, but it's like, why not? There's nothing for me to lose here. I've been successful in everything that I've put my mind to, and that I've showed up for and worked hard for. Like, this won't be any different, right? And seeing other people succeed for me that's been the transition. Like, to see somebody go from here to here, and it's like, okay, that's what I'm meant to do with my life. That's my passion space. How do I fill that up? So when you say serving is your niche, I think that's so cool, because I share some of that same thought. So
yeah. Well, I'm grateful that you're sharing. It's I haven't found my voice yet. I haven't figured out. I love people. I haven't figured out where my calling is online as far as my voice, but I think I admire you taking the leap and putting together a platform to have a conversation, because it's we need more of it. We need more. That raw information is so valuable, right? Like, it's just because it's a combination. Because if there's one piece that somebody, it works for them, that from our conversation today, that's a win. But there's a whole combination. Like you said, there's lots of people out there coming from a place of contribution that are sharing quality information. And I don't know about you, but it's, I could be given a piece of advice, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. And then I read it somewhere else, and it's just got a little bit of a different spin on it. And I'm like, ooh, you know what? Listen to this. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Didn't we just talk about that over here? You know what I mean? So sometimes it's just being open and ready to kind of connect with the information, and just being open to receiving. I practice receiving. I practice, if someone tells you your hair looks nice or something, I'm like, thank you. Instead of like, oh, this, like, doesn't do anything. It's be comfortable with just receiving, because if you shut that down, you're telling the universe you have enough. And if you want to come from a place of abundance and more, you have to show up that way. And you can't Jedi mind trick the universe. It knows, right? It's like, God knows. And so you have to just be authentic with yourself and keep trying. It's not a light switch. It's not like one day you're just like, oh, now I'm enlightened. It's, for me, it's been years of just trying to fill my cup, keep a cup that's half full versus half empty. Because what I have found is life is really hard. And one thing that speaks to me is I'm like, what makes life a little easier? Money. Money makes life a little bit easier. Life is still going to happen. Things are still going to happen. I was like, and it's not my job to take care of my entire family, but it's one of my whys for getting out of bed is I want to, I mean, my dad tells me, he's like, Alicia, we qualified for food stamps growing up, and he wouldn't take it because he was prideful. You know, he's like, no, I took more jobs. I worked harder. And I didn't know that, right? Growing up, I'm like, when you don't have money, but you live in, your parents shelter you from that, and they're working hard, there's some underlying messages that are happening there that I didn't quite understand how grateful I was to my parents until I had a family of my own, right? So once I had a family of my own, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm just doing the best that I can. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, hey, you should know, I've never been 41 before. You should know, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, and I share that little insight with them because I don't want them to think that I have it all figured out and I know what I'm doing. Because I'm like, newsflash, none of us do.
Yeah.
I'm like, I recognize, you know, it's my parents are in their 70s now. I'm like, they don't know what they're doing still, you know, and that's wonderful. That's like the secret of life. It's not like you have to get it that you're like, oh, now I've arrived. No, we're all a work in progress, and we're given 100 years on this planet to serve. And once you figure out what your gift is, your job then is to give it away, help inspire other people. So whether that happens at an early age or later in life, it's when you feel compelled to share your piece, let it out. Shout it from the rooftops. People need to hear it. And he's counting on you.
I agree. I've found that it's the journey that makes me the happiest. You know, I mean, when I tell people like, hey, get out there and chase your passions, it's like, yeah, it can sound cliche, but and sometimes you're going to chase something, you're going to realize that you weren't all that passionate about it.
Right.
You know, but I feel like this is my theory on like today's world it is historically high for anxiety and depression. And I thought, well, how could that be when we're living in the easiest life ever in history? It is now the easiest. And I go, well, surely it's the mindset of how you perceive what's easy, because a lot of people thinking that it's hard, right? And my theory is this, is that back to that box idea, is that I feel like everybody's so riddled with these anxiety and depression demons because they are not doing what they should be doing, what they know they should be doing. So they're not chasing certain things. They're not reacting certain ways. So think about when you see somebody like at the grocery store and internally your mind says, say hi, wave to that lady, open the door, and you don't do it. And then you just go to your vehicle and you're like, damn it. You know, a series of those type of events, I mean, just every single day. And you know this as a parent, when you start a family and you have children, I mean, you go on autopilot, your adrenaline kicks in, it's survival mode. And you're just like, you're serving so many other people's needs and not your own. And what happens over time is that you get full of anxiety and depression because there's all these things that just want to come out, you know, whether you didn't finish your schooling, or you didn't go athletics, you know, you didn't give it everything in athletics, or, you know, you didn't save money when you knew you should have saved money there. Like all these things build up over time and then it just hits you. And I think that's what creates anxiety and depression for a lot of people that don't have like a genetic, you know.
Well, they say stress is man-made. We create it.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Through your environment and through your mentality and how you're seeing things, you know. And there's so much great information out there. This is what is really cool, I think, about the world now, is that it's a ginormous echo chamber. It's a ginormous library, if you will, of information. I don't think you can say things. I think all the truth is out there. I think all the secrets are out there. All the magic pills that people look for, they're all out there. They've existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's like, to your point, it's like, how do you perceive it? Sometimes it's just, I tell people all the time, like, choose your flavor. You know, it's like a vehicle. There's 1,000 Ford Explorers on the road. Which one do you like? You know, I like the white one with the black wheels, or I like the red one with the chrome wheels, or like we all get to choose your flavor. And you can do that with people that you don't have to agree with everybody. It's like this conversation that you and I are having. Like, this is not gospel. Like, you do not need to agree with everything here. What you need to do is you need to be open-minded to just take little nuggets from every little conversation, because like you said, they're gifts. Like, there's a reason why, if you're listening or watching this right now, there's a reason why. I totally believe that there's a divine reason why you are doing this right now with your time.
Amen. Well, the thing that I think about too is sometimes, so there's a saying that we can't control our first thought, but we can control our second thought. So it's that wiring and firing, right? That we can kind of retrain. And it's, they're still, we'll call them old tapes that sometimes play in my head.
Highlight
what
reels.
I do is I don't put a belief behind it, right? I poke holes in it right away. But you can't control that thought. So somebody might be thinking as they're going, all right, you know, I want to try this. I want to try showing up and putting my best foot forward. And then they have a thought that isn't in alignment with, you know, what they just set out to do. And they think, like that can be frustrating. It's like, well, newsflash, those thoughts are not going to stop. It's conditioning over time that helps you rewire it. And it's practice. So don't call it like, oh gosh, why am I having that thought? Like, I'm just like, no, I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course I'm going to crush this. And it's, you know, with anything that I'm doing, it's, I coach myself through it. I talk out loud. I sometimes use my windshield time to just turn off my music and talk out loud. If I'm on the way to an appointment, I talk about what questions are they going to ask me? How am I going to answer that? And I just start kind of having dialogue with myself and think out loud or, you know, talk so I can just hear, because I think sometimes in our mind, it plays tricks on us. Mm-hmm. And I mean, have you ever, it's just to kind of give you an example. So when I was going through all of the heart stuff, we get home, we settle in, and I'm just like, dang, like, why is this happening? And I say to Bo, we need to have a talk. He's like, okay, this sounds serious. And I was like, well, I just need you to, this is what's going on in my brain, and I need to say it out loud. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just going to say how I'm feeling. And he's like, okay. I was like, I think we should get divorced. And he was like, get divorced? Why would we get divorced? And I was like, well, here's the deal. If I'm going to die, don't you think it's easier if we just start figuring out life without me? Does that make sense? And he's like, Alicia, no, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, well, I'm agreeing with you as I'm saying it out loud, but in my brain, part of me was starting to believe that maybe I should find a way to separate myself from everybody so I don't cause anybody pain. So I can start building that bridge and helping everybody get through it, but get comfortable with me not being there. And when you say it out loud, it sounds ludicrous, right? And he's like, Alicia, this is absolute, we're absolutely not getting a divorce, and you're not going anywhere. I'm like, no, I'm not, but I just want to protect you guys. And I really didn't enjoy being life on the sidelines. And that's how I felt like, you know, you're just on the sidelines. And so you've got these nutty little thoughts, and whatever you're dealing with, there may be some thoughts that aren't in alignment with where you're going. And it's okay to have those thoughts. Don't put a belief behind it. Say it out loud. Talk to your spouse, talk to a best friend, talk to somebody that is in your corner and helps put some context to it. Because, you know, get a coach, get a therapist, get a whatever, call your mom, like somebody that is propping you up, get them in your corner and start saying some of these things out loud, because you too will realize that our mind can be pretty tricky, where we can take a thought that makes absolutely no sense, but we start cementing that, going, yep, this could be the right thing. You know, it's, you know, maybe a divorce is. And so you start showing up in other ways because you're now believing it. Like, this might be a logical thought. It's not logical. And, you know, so I'm a big believer in, you got to communicate. Communication is key. So, I mean, my husband and I, we talk about everything, and we don't, judgy, right? So I'm like, if something comes out, I'm like, so this is another thing. I don't know if you've had a topic on this, but I feel like when you turn 50, you know how people say midlife crisis, and they go buy a fast car and go get the younger wife or whatever it may be, or what the younger spouse. I told Bo, I was like, so we're going to be empty nesters at 46, and what do you think about like being married forever? Like, that's what I'd like for us to do. And he's like, well, yeah, that's the plan, Alicia. And I was like, but something happens at 50 and nobody's talking about it. Like, why? Why is it taboo to get old? Why is it taboo to talk about, maybe you're attracted to somebody else. Maybe you looked, I'm like, can we talk about this? And he's like, sure. So we have this whole dialogue on, I'm like, our saying is, just because you're on a diet doesn't mean you can't look at the menu. And it's meaning half the world is male, half the world is female, and you may find yourself attracted to somebody else. It's normal. You're human, right? As human beings, we are not designed to mate for life. You know, we're not doves. We aren't. I was like, it's work. It's really hard work. And marriage is not always rainbows and butterflies, at least in my world, in the world that I live in. There's hard things that we've worked through. And I am so grateful for every one of those tough conversations. And every single time we come out stronger and better on the other side. And so it's not this picture of everything's perfect and just works out. No, it's messy. And there's twists and turns and sacrifices. But set your intention and don't sell yourself short. And certainly don't dim your light for anybody. It's, you know, I had a coworker one time that we had different preferences in the way that we talked. And I was talking with my coach. I'm like, do I have to dim my light for this? Like, is that what I need to do to be a team player? And she was like, no, you need to lower your vibration. I was like, okay, that made sense to me. Not dimming my light. Don't dim your light for anybody, but sometimes you got to lower your vibration just to be a team player and make sure all the voices are heard, because none of us are as smart as all of us. And we need all of the feedback at the table. That's when we're strongest. And I have no problem speaking up. If I don't make time, if I'm talking all the time, which I might be running this whole podcast talking the whole time, it's sorry.
I'm glad. This is why I have guests on. This is perfect.
But it's sometimes, like when I'm in a team meeting, I sit on my hands, and that's my reminder in this meeting that I'm not going to speak up. I'm just going to hold a space for others to share, because I can improve any idea, anything you throw at me. I'm like, ooh, let's get excited about that. We could do this, we could do that. And I'm going to be a cheerleader and a champion for whatever you've got going on, because it makes me tick. It brings me joy, and I love it. And I love a result. I love getting it done. And and I love seeing others succeed. Well, what I have found is I sometimes like steamroll people, right? Because I'm too excited, and then they're not comfortable sharing anymore, right? That they're like, oh man. So I'm like, that's my little trick. I sit on my hands and I don't always speak. And that's been a tactic that's worked for me. And it's not because I don't have something to say. It's because I'm carving out time to make sure I'm honoring the other thoughts in the room, because there's no shortage of information coming from my brain, but that doesn't mean that it all needs to be said right now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I'm the same way. I have a tendency of just like in team meetings or anything like that, you know, I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. And then when I'm quiet, somebody thinks something's wrong with me. Like, oh, Justin's pissed off or something's going on. Yeah. You know, it's like, no, I'm just like, I'm trying to get this under control. You know, I'm trying to practice, you know, kind of holding back, because I realize that there's a lot of great opinions out there, you know. And one thing that's really stuck with me was this thing that I saw. It said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so I always try to like make sure that I'm getting insight from as many people as I can. But kind of back to what we were talking about a little bit there is with, I feel like the big thing, like everything that you just said to me, I feel like you are somebody who is really like truly themselves, you know, and a lot of people say that they're themselves, but I feel like you are
all day, every day. Like
you 100% like, You are the yeah, exactly. Fully verified you. So I feel like we need more of that. I know that that's kind of my point when people are like kind of hiding in this box and these anxiety and depression demons set in, and then they kind of end up making decisions for you. Is I feel like we're so worried about what other people think that we almost live a giant lie. Like our life is just one big lie. Yeah. And it's not one big lie, it's just a series of just tiny, tiny, tiny lies every single day. And those are like inactions, not telling your spouse that they look good, not telling, your kids that you love them, or just little things like this.
That they know, right?
Yes.
They don't know. You have to tell them. They have to hear the words. And it's like, get comfortable with your words. And it's
uncomfortable to do if you don't. Like I grew up very similar to you. My family, their love language is not, it's not hugging, it's not saying I love you. Like if that stuff happens today, it's like awkward, know? And so in my house, I try to do it all the time. My wife says I definitely don't do it enough with her, and that's a little bit harder for me because I wasn't raised in that environment. I didn't see my dad do that with my mom, I didn't. And so my wife will think, well, there's something like I'm pissed off or he doesn't love me or whatever. And it's like, no, can't be, further from the truth. It's just how my brain is. And for me as a male, it's so much easier for me to show that love and tenderness to my children for some reason. Yes. Like my daughter, she's 6, and like her and I just, like her and her mom, they butt heads all the time, but then I can come in and be kind of like this equalizer. And she has a way of getting to me and I have a way of getting to her. And it's such a cool feeling, Yeah, and then I feel bad because I think my wife sees that and she's like, oh yeah, like sweet and nice to her, but then you're ass to me. Well,
I had a girlfriend that was doing love languages with her. So she had done it with her spouse, but she did it with her children too. And she had a little one that was 5 years old, and this little girl, Josie, she was always like, hey, like they'd be at a restaurant was her example. She goes, and Josie would be like, hey mom, let's come to the bathroom with me. And she's like, Josie girl, the bathroom's right there. Like, go to the bathroom. We're right here. Come on back. And then when she did the love languages, she realized Josie's love language was quality time. So going to the restroom at the restaurant was her way of carving out some quality little one-on-one time. So once she recognized like, oh, she wants, a little one-on-one time to go to the potty together, because that made her feel connected. And I'm like, those are just like aha moments. Like, we try and we work on our relationship with our spouse, but it's thinking of our little humans is we don't give them enough credit. I mean, my kids teach me things all the time, just like their way of looking at the world. And I remember when my son we were at the park near our house and he was little and he was coming down the slide and there was another little kid that was taking a little too long to get off the end of the slide. And my son went and, so they hit each other, right? Yeah. So, and they don't know each other, these two little kids, but what do? They stand up and they wrap each other in a hug and said, I'm sorry. And then they went their separate ways. And I was sitting there on a park bench, just watching like, a random little thing. Like how often do we do something where we just need to say, I'm sorry and give a quick hug and move on? Like, so simple. I'm like, he doesn't know this kid from Adam. And they just wrapped each other up and we're like, I'm sorry, like just being human. I'm like, it's incredible. I'm like, I don't know how many people I've run over and I haven't stopped or said, I'm sorry. I'm like, lesson. That's a huge lesson that it's, take ownership of all the things. I take ownership for the things that I didn't even say sometimes when I'm dealing in business. Yeah. I'm like, I'm sorry that I didn't say that and set the expectation to let you know that shouldn't be happening, right? Like, yeah. Just take ownership of the day, period, end dot. Whether it's your fault or not, take on ownership and just, I call it burning your ships. Like it's
burn the boats.
Burn the boats. Have you read this? The Sea of Cortez, and they're coming in and the captain's rallying the troops and he's like, and they're like, we're going to lose. They can see us coming. We're slow. And They have time to prepare and it's their home turf. And the captain is like, hey,
We're
like the
conquering.
boat's on fire. If we leave, we're leaving on their boats. There is no exit strategy. And it gives me goosebumps every time I talk about that because I believe in that. And I will light my ship. I've already lit my ships on fire. They are burnt down and it's, and I'm going for it.
It's so funny you said that, because that's what I was going to end the podcast with, as I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
No. I was going to say, you sound like the epitome of that saying, burn the boats.
Burn the
Because,
boats.
yeah, and then you think about, I did this, I don't know if you've had much time to check out the podcast, but when I first started.
I have, and I've watched you before. Jen turned me on to you.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Cool. So like these someday sticky notes is what I came up with. And it's just like my version of a sticky note that you would put on your car visor or your bathroom mirror or whatever, right? And just pick a topic. And anyways, one of them was, I talk about like gambling on yourself, and I talk about the plan A and the plan B. So when you like, and I got this from the military. So like special forces people, and your dad was probably someone's very similar to this, was they adapt like when they go on a mission and stuff, they don't have a plan B.
Right.
It's a plan A. It's an execute or die mission. That's it. Mm-hmm. Like, because when you start giving at that higher level, when everybody's life is depending on one another, if you give somebody the plan B, they might interpret that plan B a little bit different, and it will cost somebody their life. So they don't even psychologically put that in to their head. And one person that I really think about this, have you seen Free Solo with on Netflix with oh my gosh.
I'm writing it down though. Free
Alex.
Solo.
This is why I need a producer so they could just Google it for me. Alex something. His last name has lost my I can't think of it, but he goes to El Capitan, which is in Yosemite National Park, and it's this ginormous cliff face, right, that everybody goes and climbs. So this guy's a free climber, so he climbs with no ropes, and he's the first one to ever do it, and it's like over 6,000 feet tall, you know. And he does it on the Netflix documentary. I'm not going to give you he's alive today, but so that kind of the spoiler alert. But when you watch it, you will have just anxiety and sweaty palms. And I think to myself, that is a plan A. That's a plan A, because there's no other outcome. You either succeed or you die. Like there's no in between there. And so what it does is it just takes his mind to this clarity place, and he's able to perform this task, which he's failed numerous amounts of times being harnessed up, yet he decides to take off the harness and do this. And it is insane. It is insane. And I'm just thinking, if I had more of that personally in my life, how far I could get, you know? And when somebody says all in, you know, that's a hashtag that I've been using with the podcast since it first started, was just all in, because I have so many other things going on and I fight this daily. This isn't something that, you're doing it for free. It's a second job. It's a second full-time job. You're finding guests, you're researching stuff, you're learning how to do audio and visual and all this stuff. And it's a second job. And it's like, why the hell am I doing this? You know, but then it just comes back, and that's, I think it happens for a lot of us, is that's that other voice in your head trying to talk you out of doing something. And that's like where you develop discipline. It's like when you don't want to exercise, you don't want to run, and that voice is telling you don't need to do it. And if you listen to that enough, you know where you end up.
Yeah.
Fighting that voice and telling everybody has that. Every successful person that you see, they have the same voice that you have in your head now telling you, I shouldn't do something.
Yeah, I shush it.
They choose not to listen to it. And that's how you get discipline.
I love it. Well, it's, I think it's Zig Ziglar says, obviously Zig was a big motivator for a lot of people over a number of years. But after one of his seminars, he recalls having a gentleman come up going, Zig, I always feel so inspired when I come to see you, and then I go home and it wears off. What do you recommend? And he's like, It's like bathing. You need to do it daily. You need to, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's a lot of people doing it well, but you just need to plug in and take what serves you wherever you're getting it from and apply it. And my buzzword this year is massive action. And I'm all about just taking massive action. And it's, I've had people say, this is a tough market. Are you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, there is opportunity in every single market. And you can't tell me it's a tough market. You can't tell me it's not going to work. It is going to work. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show up every damn day and show up in the morning.
Yourself. Yeah.
To myself. Every damn day I show up. And it's, and that's my business plan is I count on me. Because I know I'm going to show up and I'm going to move things forward. And there's times where it's like, where people say the phone gets heavier, you don't feel like doing it. I get it. It's not like every day I wake up and I'm like so energized and, just ready to go crush it. There's days where I'm like, oh, don't you just want to break? That voice of like, you don't need to lead generate today. You crushed it yesterday. Take the day off. Forget about it. Make the calls. Sit down. Do what you need to do. And that's the discipline. That's the plan, right? Set your intention and don't deviate from it. And if you do have a weak moment, don't beat yourself up. Get back on and keep going because I would say that there can be stops and starts and but you just have to keep going and that have grit,
Amen to the grit. That's what my oldest brother and I were talking the other day, and we look at our lives. We come from a single mom. We all have different dads, same mom. Welfare growing up, and then she met my stepdad. And anyways, this is a whole different podcast episode. But our upbringing, and I posed him the question. I said, what if we had more of like the traditional childhood? Like, look where we've exceeded our expectations. Maybe not personal expectations, but definitely everybody in our family. Like my brother was the first one to graduate college out of our family ever, like just these huge milestones. And he's a project manager for a ginormous construction company over in Virginia and just doing really, really well. And we just got everything that people didn't think we would have.
Yeah.
And I said, what would we be? Would we just be unstoppable if we had like a traditional, like mom and dad were still married, the love language in the house was, very intimate.
Yes.
What would it be like? And we couldn't answer it really, because I came back as like,
all of these pieces were meant, it's what brought
it was
you to
for
who you
me,
are
like
today.
you say.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It was for me. And that's how so I don't have this victim mentality. I mean, I'll catch myself just slightly, like I kind of get a little bit poor me, like, and then it just kind of goes away. But for some reason, I think that's just more of like, just it fuels the fire a little bit for me, and I wouldn't be the person that I am or on this journey at all without my past. Those things, those obstacles shape you. And so when you can take your mindset and just today, even like it's Friday when we're recording this, probably you might be listening to it on a different day or whatever when it comes out. But, you got the weekend coming up, and I would encourage people to start thinking on when they wake up in the morning, just be like, okay, my day is for me. Like things are not happening to me.
Right.
Like you said earlier in the podcast, I think that for me has worked tremendously. Everything that's going to happen today is going to be for me. So I'm looking for the opportunity. I'm looking for the silver lining. You don't have to be this ginormous
and expect
cheerleader.
Expect good things to come to you. Expect it. Like I totally anticipate things going my way. Anything that I'm doing, I'm like, of course it's going to work. Why wouldn't it? Like,
Yes.
Of course it is. And that's just my mindset. Like, yeah, I've got this. It
almost helps.
Believe
It
it.
almost helps to take like, instead of adversity, it almost comes as opportunity.
Yeah.
Because that's a constant. Like, I'll end the podcast with this because we're kind of getting long on time here. But this one of the mantras that I've picked up over the last couple of years was "Be the bison," and I've said this numerous times, but I'll share it with you. So, like when there's a storm, that approaches a herd of bison, they turn and they head into the storm because they'll get through the storm quicker that way because the storm's moving in the opposite direction. Whereas like cattle, their close relatives, they herd up together and they'll actually kind of move in the same direction as the storm. So they end up staying in the storm a lot longer, and it obviously impacts them more. And so I've been telling myself, be the bison.
I love this. I didn't know about this bison going
Isn't
into
that
the
crazy?
storm.
Yeah.
Love it.
So it's like, holy crap, this is like one of the oldest creatures on Earth. And like, if we could head on, because life is full of storms. And the longer you sit there, you can see it coming. And the longer that you sit in it, then it becomes a bigger issue. So it becomes like, procrastinating. If you turn something, you need to get it done. It's a storm. You don't want to deal with it. It's a pain in the ass. It's a little thing, but then it's like right on your doorstep and you're like, damn it, I should have taken care of that. So for me, I'm just like, okay, anything that's difficult, I can see it coming down the road. It's like making the extra phone calls in the day, or, doing whatever I need to do with business, just stuff that I don't like to do. Those are my storms, theoretically. Yeah. And so I'm just like, be the bison, just march into that damn thing. You'll get through it quicker. Here you go.
Amen. That's a great closing note. Be the bison. I love
Be the bison. Awesome. Alicia Reinhard, everybody. Thank you, Alicia, for joining me on the Someday Life podcast. You're a freaking awesome human being, and hopefully we can connect more.
I love it.
I'm going to start this. I've been thinking about starting this actually Facebook group that it's part of the podcast, kind of the movement that's going on, because I get a lot of great feedback. And so I'm going to start this Facebook page. It's be a private group. It's called Someday Warriors, because I think about warrior and I think, they don't always win, but they always fight. And I love that mentality. And I just want people to do, if you're ever saying, someday I'll do this or someday I do that, no more of that. That's old.
Today's the day. Anymore.
Today's the day. That's right. Life's too short to wait for someday, right? So
love it.
Cool. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in.